What's up, my peeps? Joshua Smith at GSD Studios, and welcome to another Jim and Jay show. So who the hell are Jim and Jay? Jim and Jay are my personal health, fitness, nutrition, biohacking, overall life optimization mentors. These are by far the two biggest badasses that I've ever met in this space. I don't know anybody when it comes to these topics, you guys, that's more knowledgeable. So we created this show for our GSD mode listeners to have an opportunity to go out there and submit your questions here to the show. If you have any questions you want answered on the show, shoot us an email at jimandjay@gsdmode.com, and we will do our best to answer all your questions here live on the show. Also, real quick, want to plug our sponsor that makes this show possible is www.chekd.com/TRT Revolution. So on the show, Jim, Jay, and I talk a lot about getting your blood work done, checking all your different levels, your hormone levels, making sure that your body is operating at its most optimal self, right? So that is the company that Jim, Jay, and myself all use. So again, www.chekd.com/TRT Revolution. So let's jump on into the show. All right. What's up, peeps? Joshua Smith here in GSD Studios, you guys, with another episode of the Ask Jim and Jay show. So those of you that are new to the show, just tuning in for this first time, Jim and Jay are my personal health, fitness, nutrition, energy management, and overall biohacking mentors. These are the biggest badasses that I've ever met in my life when it comes to this space, you guys. So we created this show for you to have a place to come and ask anything that you want to ask. When it comes to your health, fitness, nutrition, energy management, whatever it may be, you can ask us your questions, and we do our best to answer them live here on the show. Any questions that you have, shoot us an email to jimandjay@gsdmode.com. Almost forgot the email address there. I've had several of you reaching out to me saying, hey, I emailed Ask Jim and Jay. I wasn't smart enough to do the email exactly how the show is titled. So it's not Ask Jim and Jay. It's literally Jim and Jay at gsdmode.com. So with that being said, man, as always, we get so many epic questions for you guys. Time's short, so we're going to dive on in. So the first question, you guys, last episode, which was amazing. If you guys, those of you watching, listen, if you didn't listen to last week's episode, or episode number 5 that we released, holy shit. I mean, it was about, the whole entire show was about your TRT, testosterone, estrogen management, and then the feedback we're getting from that has just been amazing. It's very deep. Go check that out. But one thing that we didn't talk about in there, and this comes up all the time, we see so many guys that have issues with this. I personally have. I know Jim made the mistake of this too at some point in his life and career. But the importance of doing cardio while you're on TRT.
Yeah, Jim, go first, man.
Dude, got to do your cardio, man, for a multitude of reasons. Especially just overall cardiovascular health. I mean, you name it. I like to think of it as something that you have to do, especially on TRT. It helps keep your hematocrit down, keeps your cardiovascular in check. I mean, we use it to create a calorie deficit. Everybody on the planet should be doing at least 20 minutes 3 times a week at the minimum.
At the minimum, right, at the minimum.
If you're a guy on TRT and you're trying to optimize your life, you're trying to stay at a low body fat percentage, or we like to call t-shirt off and be comfortable percentage. You're probably going to be doing cardio a little bit more, and it's going to help, again, keep your lipids in check, keep your hematocrit in check. You got to do it, man. It's a must do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, and obviously I shared with you guys a story about a podcast I did myself this morning with a very renowned person who's actually a doctor himself, very knowledgeable guy, incredibly bright and intelligent. And I won't name his name, but I mean, people can figure it out. But he's having a horrible problem. He was a former competitive bodybuilder. He competed not professionally, but close. He almost got his pro card. Probably could have. He has an amazing physique, but he's had massive problems with hemoglobin levels and hematocrit levels. And he's been donating and doing phlebotomy And, he's a very scientific minded guy and trying to outthink everything and think like, metabolically or biochemically, there's got to be something going on at a molecular level that's, keeping my hematocrit and my hemoglobin elevated. Because no matter what he does, he gets phlebotomized, and then literally 30 to 45 days later, his levels creep back up into the danger zone. And, he's short of breath. He has what he calls not panic attacks, but he feels like he can't breathe well. And he's at his wit's end. And I told him, I consulted with him today, and I was like, listen, man, how much cardio are you doing? And he's like, none. I'm like, what? I'm like, he's 42, 43 years old. And again, if somebody saw this guy with his shirt off walking around on the street, he looks amazing. Most guys would kill to look like this guy. But as Jim just said, it's not just about aesthetics. It's about what is going on internally, biochemically, metabolically, with your, vascular pathways, your arterial networks. All these things have to be free of gunk. They have to be free of damage, as Jim calls it, inflammation, as Brett Osborne calls it, inflammaging. I mean, all of these things, these free oxyradical development along these pathways that come from everything, right? It comes from a lack of cardiovascular activity. It comes from eating like shit, processed food. There's a million other things that cause these things. But doing cardio regularly improves the cardio efficiency of those networks. So all of those vascular pathways, all of your veins, all of your arterioles, all of these things that push blood and lymph and all this other stuff, IGF, interstitial fluid through your vascular system, it gets thickened by using testosterone, right? We know that using testosterone, and some of these guys are obviously using other substances, anabolics, super physiologic dosages, whatever, it thickens the blood. And when the blood is too thick and you're not clearing it out from cardio, okay, and then you also got to factor into a lot of these guys are trying to gain muscle, so they're eating a high caloric surplus. It just creates an environment where you're going to have elevated hematocrit and you're going to have elevated hemoglobin, which again, we talk about this in the book. These are very crucial, serious risk factors to be aware of. But until you understand that your cardio is necessary for health, because again, it's TRT, and the way we recommend it for health and longevity is multifaceted, right? It's a balanced level of hormones between testosterone and estrogen. It's, hopefully a low body fat percentage. And then on top of that, it's understanding your insulin sensitivity and eating clean. So those, the 3 pillars, as Jim calls them. So if you don't do cardio and you got all the other things in, you're asking for health problems. And obviously this guy, once I talked to him today and he figured that out, he was like, wow, could it really be that? Because guys, especially super smart guys, they just don't think they need it, right? Because they look at themselves in the mirror and they're like ripped because they eat right. And they got everything else dialed in, but they're not doing that cardio, so they're not healthy. Yeah. So you can look amazing in the mirror or with your shirt off and still be unhealthy. So it's crucial. I cannot stress it enough. I'm way more than Jim. Jim makes fun of me and says I'm a cardio queen, but the reality is, if you want to live a long life, and be healthy and stimulate your brain and your encalphins and all those other hormonal pathways and biochemical the neurotransmitters and increasing neuroplasticity, right? Which they all talk about today to increase and avoid Alzheimer's and dementia and all that. Cardio, man. Right, cardio, literally, you should do cardio every day. If it's 15 or 20 minutes and you wake up in the morning and you're not doing it like too hardcore, but you get your heart rate up to 120, 125, 130 in that range, do it. There's way more benefits than there are negatives.
Yeah, before we go too deep in that, because I got a lot of follow-up questions for both of you on cardio, right? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about it. So, but when you talked about this, so I'm one of the guys that my hematocrit goes up. I know, Jay, you're a dude that's never had an issue with that. I do. And so I end up having to give blood every 6 months or so. The first time that I discovered my hematocrit was up, you were like, dude, give blood and start doing cardio. When I went to my doctor, which I fired him since and discovered was the wrong doctor, but I went to him, I'm like, hey, my boy, who's an expert in this space, says, I need to do more cardio. Would you recommend? And he said, he tells me it has nothing to do with it.
Exactly.
He's like, he goes, Lance Armstrong paid to have your blood. Right? So it's not that cardio has to do with that. How do you debunk that? Because we do have these super smart doctors that say shit like this.
Go ahead.
So I come from the realm of kind of the fringe use of drugs, right? And this was confirmed. I listened to a Lance Armstrong podcast maybe I don't know, 6 months ago or something. I think it was with Joe Rogan. And this was confirmed by my cyclist buddies years ago in the 90s. But they use a drug called EPO, which they take. It increases your red blood cell count, and that's good for endurance activities, right? Well, when they take EPO and it gets too high, say in the 57 to 60 range, what do?
Right.
They sit on a bike and test it until it comes down to 55
Exactly.
or 53. They do cardio. They don't donate blood. They literally do cardio until it comes down. And so
Jim, but explain that. Explain that, Jim. Explain that biochemically so people understand what that means.
Because you have doctors like the doctor I had that's telling people different than what we're saying. And
Clueless.
people obviously put so much faith and trust in their doctors when they don't know what they're talking about.
No, they have absolutely no idea what they're
Guys, to be honest with you, I don't know the exact mechanical pathway. I just know that it brings your body back. Your body regulates that, and cardio increases that regulation.
Well, I mean, I can explain it a little bit. So essentially, when you're doing cardio, right, your cardiovascular activity. So let's go back a little bit. When you do cardio regularly, you increase your body's cardiovascular efficiency, right? And all that really means is your blood cycles through more effectively and clears out all of this gunk, all of these free oxyradical, these waste products that get stuck in your circulatory system faster when you're doing cardio regularly. So that nonsense of your doctor saying that, and again, a lot of doctors don't understand this, but that nonsense of your doctor saying that is because he's not familiar with this kind of stuff. Because again, Josh, and we talked about this earlier today with the doctor that I had the podcast with, they don't teach this kind of stuff in medical school. Okay, this is not part of standard patient care medicine, which is what they learn in medical school. So this is the kind of stuff that people like Jim and I, who work in the performance realms, who work in the TRT realms, the age management realms, this is the stuff that we see and have to assess. And I didn't know this either, because literally 17 or 18 years ago when I dealt with this problem, I didn't know. There was no answer, because there are no answers to this. But as Jim said, you start dealing with professional cyclists, you start dealing with people at the top of performance realms and enhancement and all this stuff. They're self-experimenting and they're figuring this stuff out. And they did figure it out. And I would actually say that would be in not just the cyclist community, but also the track and field community, the people that are running miles. They figured this out, that the way you reduced thick blood was through cardiovascular efficiency, through improving your cardiovascular performance. Now, there's a lot of stuff that goes under that, your VO2 max, your wind capacity, and then you also have to understand muscle fibers, right? Like people that have the bodies that are runners, quote unquote, they have a lot of type 2 and type 3 muscle fibers, which are endurance, smooth, long muscle fibers. So their fiber typing is conducive to them having good cardiovascular efficiency and having this ability to clear lactate and break down products and all these things that get in the blood from exercise. So the reality is that your doctor probably did his best job as he could, because he's going from textbooks, he's going from his understanding and medical background and his formal schooling. There isn't any information. So this is the kind of stuff that you learn from people like that Jim and I learned from, and also performance athletes at the top of sport who have experienced this. But I say it because I have been doing this and recommending this to guys for more than 15 years. And I've never seen one guy who didn't start doing cardio regularly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, who didn't have an improvement in both his hemoglobin and his hematocrit right away, like literally within 30 days. And you know this, right? Like when you get a high hematocrit, you start feeling sluggish. You start feeling run down. There's times in the day where you're just like, what the hell? I have no endurance. Like I feel stuffy. I feel kind of like weird. You never have that feeling when you keep your hematocrit, in the like the 42 to 44 range. And I've never been over 45. And I know it's just because of cardio. Yeah. It's because I regularly do cardio. So it's like that for everybody. And I've never seen a guy, and obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but I've never seen a guy who started to do cardio and maintained it with a regular frequency who didn't have the same issue where the levels dropped.
Yeah, man. And I can attest to that firsthand, as far as like right now, I just had my blood work done and my hematocrit, I think, was like 59. Yeah, right. So it's definitely high on the high range. Now I have all these excuses. Hey, I'm working 18 hours a day.
Right,
Yeah,
you
you know,
don't
I've
sleep
got
enough.
15 minutes to go in there and squeeze in chest, but I don't
You
squeeze in
don't
the
sleep
cardio.
enough, dude. You don't sleep enough and no cardio, and that's
but
definitely
I'll tell you from this, like when I feel the best, absolutely is when I have the right combination of resistance training and cardio training. As far as energy, I mean, I feel like a god when I'm doing that, right? And when I'm deep in projects like I am right now, and I sacrifice that, man, I feel like shit. You know, so okay. So
well, I mean, I'm the same way. I'm the same way right now because I'm trying to gain a little bit of muscle, and that's something that we're going to talk about when we develop our programs and automate this stuff. But when you go through a rip phase in your life, right after the rip phase is when you want to gain muscle. So I'm coming off. We came back from Cabo. I got really lean, and I'm eating right now. So I'm not trying to do cardio when I'm trying to lean, and I'm already feeling it. Like I feel heavier already, so I'm sure my stuff's level. But I want to go back just real quick before we go to the next question. Guys they hear cardio and they just panic psychologically. Oh, I don't want to do it. Because cardio sucks. It's boring. Who the hell wants to sit there for 45 minutes or an hour, and that's the mindset, and pedal away on a bike or, plod away on a Stairmaster? I'm telling you, and Jim will, echo this beyond me, 15 to 20 minutes is all you need. Literally a day. If you can tell me that you can't find 15 or 20 minutes, I don't believe you're full of shit. You're just coming up with excuses. Anybody can do it.
And with today's technology, cardio is not boring. Cardio was boring in the 90s when you were trying to get your Discman to run.
That's absolutely
reaching your batteries to get a different disc, bro.
Dude, I'll send you an app, this brand new app that this guy just gave me, this brain entrainment app that does the 7 chakras. And you can program it to do a song, not a song, but a 432 megahertz beat for every chakra, for all your 7 chakras. And you can program it per chakra. So let's say you wanted to hit your crown chakra for 3 minutes, but you only want to hit your mid-body chakra or your root chakra for 1. You can do that. So you can literally put this damn thing on when you wake up in the morning and meditate while you're doing your cardio. It's absolutely sick.
Yeah. That's badass. Yeah, and I mean, I just love to, I do audiobooks, man, and you just go out there and crush it and do that, and it's becomes pretty epic. So, then the next question is, because a lot of dudes, like, kind of like when like guys like me when I was growing up trying to pack on muscle, you're like, well, fuck, dude, cardio depletes muscle mass. Yeah, right? I mean, Jay, people can't see it on this podcast. Both of you guys are absolute beasts, but you're both yoked as hell. But Jay, you do 2 cardio day sessions. You're not lacking muscle mass.
I never lose muscle.
You're massive, right? So, like, just kind of debunk that. If I'm the guy dude, I'm going to lose muscle. I want to try to gain. I can't do cardio.
So Jim, you go after me because I love this question. I've answered it 100 times in my life. So there is a caveat here. If you're under 30, okay, and you are ectomorphic, or even mesomorphic, you're not like you're the different, Josh. Endomorphics are different. But if you're ecto, so you're skinny, you're naturally lean and skinny, or you're meso, you're naturally muscular. When you're under 30, doing cardio too much or too high of intensity can definitely not eliminate, but it can tilt the balance of losing muscle versus maintaining. Okay. And that there's the very simple reason for that is you're not neurologically efficient at holding on to muscle. Everything changes. Josh, you and I have had this conversation. Everything changes at like 36. Maybe some guys it's 37. Jim and I couldn't sit here and explain it to you, but your body just slows down. Maybe that's where the Anunnaki, they clamped us. But your body slows down at 36 or 37, where all of a sudden, if you're muscular, you don't lose muscle anymore. You would literally have to stop eating at all. Now, I'm not talking about freaks at 300 pounds who are trying to be super heavyweight bodybuilders who need to take massive dosages of gear and massive dosages of or massive intakes of calories. But a normal dude like Jim, and Jim's no normal dude, but a 250, 260 pound guy who's lean is not going to start losing muscle because he's doing cardio. So it's an absolute myth. And again, propagated and promulgated by the supplement companies, by the bodybuilding magazines who want you to eat their food and take their pre-workouts and eat every 3 hours.
So I'll speak from my own experience. When I became an intelligent bodybuilder, I started doing cardio. Previously, I was doing cardio. I went through a period where I thought, cardio was going to hinder my mass gains. And
Got to keep them gains, bro.
That didn't last long, fortunately. But I would say from 95 on, I had always done cardio, whether it be even sitting on the bike 15, 20 minutes after my workout, drinking my protein shake just to keep circulation increased while I drank my shake, to 20 to 30 minutes, or if I was prepping for a contest, up to an hour, 2 times a day. But even at my heaviest body weight, when I was trying to break 300 pounds, I had to go back to doing a longer session of cardio because my hunger was completely shut down. And so I had to do cardio to keep my hunger up.
Right.
And so I've always done it. It's always helped me. It's always been beneficial. And the only times where I felt like I was in jeopardy of losing muscle is being sub 5 or 6% body weight, trying to peel that last little bit off. And to be honest with you, I mean, that's a very specialized situation. Right. And you can't do it without losing some muscle.
Josh, actually, Jim just hit on something that I need to go back to because he's right. There was a guy, and he's really an elite guy, and I knew his son. His son played basketball with me in high school for a year. When I was traveling on the East Coast at different high schools in different states. His name was Jim. You remember John Perillo? And John Perillo was one of the first guys who actually figured out that doing cardio when you were also trying to gain muscle was actually more efficient because it increased your body's thermodynamic rate to burn calories. So if you're a big dude, you what?
Yeah, it speeds up your metabolism.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a big dude, right, and you're trying to put on mass, you're 240 pounds and you're trying to go to 250 and you're on gear, whatever. Think about it. You got to eat more food. So how are you going to process more calories metabolically and thermogenically rotate through them without doing more work, but not the kind of work that would break down tissue, which would be high intensity. So he would always advocate 45 minutes a day at like 115 to 120 heartbeats per minute and still eating 25 calories per pound. So there's a lot of math in there.
I've always came up with that analogy, like that's putting a larger carburetor on your motor.
Exactly.
And that's how I explained it. Other than that, I don't know biochemistry.
No, it's true. I mean, it's true. I mean, it's absolutely true. It's like thinking of the movie Back to the Future. The flux capacitor. It was running on garbage, but it was still increasing power because you were, exponentially, you were putting in more horsepower. So how did you do it? Well, you had to eat more and generate that flux capacitor in the movie. So the reality is it is true, Josh. It is a myth. And like I said, with the exception of guys under 30 who are not neurologically efficient yet, and that's almost anybody, but it's mostly guys that are naturally skinny. Because I'll give you a story. I remember when I'd be 29 or 30 and I was playing basketball a lot, but I finally got myself up to like 195 before I was ever on TRT. And I would go away for a weekend playing basketball and not eat. And I would come back and I'd be 183 or 184. And I'd be like, holy shit, I just lost 10 pounds or 8 pounds, And it's just because your body just wasn't efficient at holding on to any size that you had, especially when you weren't like completely dialed in and eating, enough to maintain. Again, I was a naturally skinny dude. But, that was something I didn't learn until I was in my mid-30s that, okay, wow, why am I not losing the mass anymore? Now I'm holding on to it and I can still play basketball. I mean, I stopped playing and stuff like that. But that's what it is. It's neurologic efficiency, and it hits about mid-30s for everybody.
And if you're an extreme ectomorph and you're a skinny-ass guy and have a hard time putting on weight, you might look in the mirror and go, I don't need to do cardio. But just for the health reasons, man, just for the cardiovascular reasons alone, you need to do it. Definitely got to do it.
100%.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, and the cool thing today is with technology, man. I mean, like for example, like if I want to watch a show on Netflix, I can stream that shit on here and walk up and around my hallway at my house while I'm watching that. Like you don't have to sit your ass on the couch, right? Like maybe like, I can't get to the gym. You can always figure out a way to incorporate activities that you're doing and do that.
Totally.
Like I've always done when I'm on my coaching calls, I fucking walk. Right? Just go out there and pace and walk.
Exactly.
So, okay. So next question, because we got a lot of questions here. So what are your thoughts on the concept of learned helplessness in our culture as it pertains to conditioning of young men growing up in our society with everything working against their innate hormonal, psychological, and masculine male characteristics? Could the emasculination and passivity of our modern men be all linked to low testosterone levels from, shit, this is a long question, from birth, along with, I don't even know how to say this one, I don't even know.
Xenotrope?
Oh yeah, xenoestrogens.
Yeah,
right?
there you go, dude. In the environment and social conditioning leading to generations of fearful, submissive, and depressed men. Is it a nature versus nurture, or a consequence of both?
And that's a deep, awesome question. And allow me to put my tinfoil hat on real quick here. Hold on.
We got a lot of those questions after last week, man. I mean, I think it's.
Honestly, that's an epic question, and I'll just go, and I know Jim could talk all night on this too, but I'll go to this book, Josh, and I recommend you read the Shadow Men book, and these guys, this guy, I'll just give you a 50,000 summary. So the guy that wrote Shadow Men is a guy by the name Dr. Anthony Napoleon, and he is a CIA trained psychiatrist, and he basically studied like demography and Keynesian economics and all these different things over the last 30 years in the United States, just looking at the United States. And he basically, I read his book. His book is mind-blowingly fascinating. I know Jim read it too. And his theory is that basically they have been manipulating everything to create men that are wusses. You know what I mean? To basically dumb men down, reduce masculinity, as he said, emasculate men, and make them, powerless. And again, it's hard to say that because it sounds so conspiratorial, but when you read this guy's book, and this guy is, I'll let Jim talk about it, he is brilliant. I mean, you read like a chapter of his book and you're like, holy shit. I mean, he sucks you in. And then he also goes on and tell you as he's writing the book that like, this is the kind of information that they would never make public, but there's shadow men on this planet. They're at war with other shadow men. And he's writing at the behest of a group of shadow men that employs him. And he's basically like, they're letting me write this. If this was 20 years ago, I wouldn't be able to tell you that this is how they actually, program us and how they keep us hypnotized and, buying into, the myths of popular culture. But to make a long story short, yes, the answer to that guy's question is yes. This has been engineered. It has been ongoing. Josh, as you know from the book, we are fighting so many front war with, the environmental issues, with the disruption to our endocrine system from all those chemicals on all this engineered food. I mean, it's almost impossible to be a man today in a large coastal population center and be able to ward off all the attacks that are coming from us. I mean, it's like I was, and Jim, has a phrase about the Normandy thing. I'll let him get to that. But the reality is that men of masculine nature have been declining, and they've been declining since like the 70s, like this. It's not like a gradual curve or a bell curve. It's like just a steep descent. And again, I linked to the data in the book, and the book says from the study that I linked it to that over the last 20 years, the sperm, the percentage of healthy male spermatozoa has declined by 100%. So essentially, men 20 years from today were carrying double the amount of sperm that an average man walking around society does today. So I mean, imagine what that means to the birth rate, to the decline of masculinity. I mean, all of these things are very, very accurately tracked, and there's study and data to back all this up. So the answer to this question are absolutely yes.
Yeah, and I mean, we break it down, man. I have like more of my friends than not that have trouble getting pregnant.
Yes.
Right? And then Jay, you and I, we just brought our families to Disneyland, and you and I were like looking around like we couldn't tell if these teenagers were guys or girls. It's just insane.
It's incredible. Bro. I mean, it's like what we said last week or on last week's show, right? Like I know you guys agree with me that within 5 years and 10 years at most, these centers, these fertility centers, these hormonal optimization centers, whatever we're going to call them, hopefully we'll own them all. They're going to be on every block. I mean, they're going to be like Starbucks. I mean, how are dudes not going to be, attending to these, whether it's because they have no test or it's because they can't get a woman pregnant? I mean, they have to be. I mean, it's like I said, I mean, there's no way to avoid it. It's nuts, dude. Jim, what are your thoughts, dude?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'll tell the story about when we were compiling data for your book, man. I wish I need to know who this guy is so I can quote him properly. But he was a doctor that had studied this phenomenon and said that every male on the planet has a lower testosterone count. It doesn't matter if you're living in a remote village in Africa somewhere that hasn't been visited by outside people or not. Every single male on Earth, it's almost as if something's being sprayed on us. And so what's that a result of? I don't know. I mean, we could
Monsanto.
Speculate about
it is being sprayed on us. It's being sprayed on our fruits and our vegetables. I mean, let's face it.
But so you take that into account, and then look at the habits that we have today. I mean, the technology has wussified
Totally, man.
and us. You walk around and I go to the beach here and I see kids walking down the beach on their freaking phone, man. Nobody's fighting, throwing balls, running in the water. I mean, it's a different scene than it was 20 years ago.
It's incredible, man.
And the body type have changed, right? I mean, you look at the kids too. Body types have completely changed. Is that from food? Is that from hormonal changes? Is that from habits? I think it's all the above.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, man, when Jay and I, we were playing a game, dude. Is that a dude or is it a chick? We couldn't tell with it, especially when they're the younger generations, man, you can't tell. And we see the crap happening with Jenner, Oh, do we have somebody joining us here?
Yeah. Hey, Curtis, log off, bro.
Hang on.
Log off. Just log off.
I need to hang up.
Yeah, log off.
All right, hang on.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Hang up. Call back.
Yeah, just hang up.
Okay.
I'll text you. Sorry about that, Josh. Keep going.
Is that a coaching client? You guys okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay,
Keep
no
going.
worries. All right, yeah. Okay, so next question. And this is another long question here. So in the hypothetical situation of if I were to completely switch to a fat as a fuel and taking metformin, would it lower the expression of the faster fibers you might need to run fast for a decently long time? So say I'm not, say that I'm not extreme long distance, but I'm doing a 10-mile run or a 6-mile run mile pace, or a 6-minute per mile pace. Wouldn't taking metformin while training at that kind of pace decrease performance?
So I think this is a multifaceted question. I know Jim kind of answered it in the group, but I'll let Jim finish and answer it too. There's a couple other components to that question beyond what he was asking. But go ahead, Jim, answer that part right there.
Well, didn't we come across data that showed the use of metformin lowered your VO2 max?
Yes.
So there's that piece of it. Second piece of it is if you're in a true ketogenic state, it doesn't really matter if you're taking metformin or not. The use of metformin when you're deep in ketosis isn't really I don't think be beneficial at all. So I don't understand that question as it pertains to use of metformin while on a ketogenic diet, training for endurance specific events.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be wise anyway, right? I mean, you need to have the
reason why we take metformin, right, is to lower the glucose inability to produce lower the liver's inability to produce glucose.
Right.
So that's the main that's the main reason, and the benefit of that is we have less insulin, so we become more insulin sensitive. So if you're in a ketogenic diet, it doesn't matter.
Right.
If you're in a true ketogenic state, you don't need metformin.
So quick question though, because metformin, you get a lot of people tossing around that, hey, it's the wonder drug for anti-aging and all that. So let's say I'm an Ironman athlete training for Ironmans, right? And then I'm taking metformin. I mean, I know they kind of contradict each other with maybe the goals that you're having, but could you still get the anti-aging performance as a long-distance athlete, even though you're taking in an ungodly amount of carbs?
Well, so Jim, let me answer this. So let me. So there's a lot of confusion, first off, about these Ironman people and their eating. I can't share the data. I recently talked to a doctor, a researcher, who works with these Ironman triathletes, ultra endurance people. That's what we'll classify them as. So the big thing that's going on in the ultra endurance community right now is that all the guys are literally breaking down in their 30s because they have literally pushed their endocrine systems to nothing. They have no testosterone. I mean, some of these guys are coming out literally testing at 8 12, 15 total testosterone levels. So they're literally like walking around 1 foot in the grave, like functionally dead. And it's again because they have literally trained their body's central nervous system to total destruction. You know, you're running 40 miles a day, 6 days a week. I mean, come on. Okay. So something else that ends up happening with this, and this is where I think that these guys are all behind the times from a standpoint of they don't understand metformin and the way it works is if you're running that much, okay, and your energy demands because of all the calories that you're burning from the activity is so massive that you're literally eating, and this is not an exaggeration, you're eating 750 to 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day. Well, guess what you're doing to your insulin chemoreceptors? You are blasting them into oblivion, okay? And as we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, and Jim and I have talked about it in some other videos that we've answered on TRT Revolution, your chemoreceptors only have a certain life expectancy, okay? If you're genetically blessed and you have amazing insulin sensitivity from birth, you probably can go longer than a guy who's endomorphic like you, Josh, and doesn't have the quality of insulin sensitivity. Most of the people in my family are very insulin insensitive and obese or fat, just soft. So if think about it. If you're an ectomorphic guy, a skinny guy with a lot of endurance muscle fibers, and you're literally eating 750 to 1,000 grams of carbs a day, and that is not unrealistic. Do the math on that. That's only like 3,500 to 4,000 calories a day from carbohydrates, right? Maybe they get another 1,500 or whatever from protein and maybe another 1,500 or whatever from fat. I mean, these guys, it's not uncommon. These guys eat 6, 7, 8,000 calories a day. And they're still skinny. They don't gain any muscle. They're destroying their insulin sensitivity over time. And that's why when you and I talked before the show started today, and we're going to get a lot of pushback from the ultra triathlete and the endurance community when they watch this, because they're going to come at us hard and say, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, trust me, I do. And those people need metformin more than anybody else because they need a suppression of their blood glucose. They need something that can artificially sustain their insulin chemoreceptors from wearing out because they're going to wear out. And I'm telling you, this guy, in talking to this researcher, and again, I'm not going to name his name because he's going to be on a podcast later, he said that these people have no idea what kind of diseases of aging they are in for in their late 40s and in their 50s of their life when their chemoreceptors fail. And they all become type 2 diabetics, okay, or worse. So all I'm saying is that if you're a massive endurance athlete and you're pounding down 1,000 grams of carbs a day, and a lot of them do, it's not, I mean, Josh, you've seen what these guys eat. They're eating bars like in an hour, 2 or 3 of them that each have 200 grams of carbs in them.
Yeah.
Okay, to refuel. So if you're doing that, if you're one of these guys, you should absolutely be using metformin. Okay, it's not going to inhibit your body's ability to absorb the glucose. It'll suppress the glucose, the signal, the massive release, but that's what you need. I mean, again, I'm just looking at this for a long-term life expectancy purpose, a health purpose. I'm not saying that it may not, and Jim will probably agree with me, it may limit performance a tiny bit at that moment because, yes, you are shunting the insulin spike from all the sugar. But again, for me, it's all about how long you're going to live, man, and how healthy are you going to be over time. I mean, you're not going to be healthy if for 10 to 15 years of your life, you are consuming 1,000 to 1,500 grams of carbs a day. I'm sorry, dude. Your shit's going to burn out and you're going to have some sort of disease, inflammation. I mean, everything is going to go bad.
Yeah, right before we hit the play button, I jumped on here with you guys. I had a podcast with an amazing lady who's one of the top triathlon and Ironman coaches out there. She's an athlete herself and coached a lot of people. And she said that the number one issue with most of her clients, and not just her clients, but all of the athletes, is they way undereat. Right? Because of, dude, like you're talking, I mean, these guys are running a marathon plus, the 6 mile swim plus the biking, I mean, they have to consume 8,000 calories a day just to sustain what they're building and training.
Exactly, just to maintain, right.
Yeah.
I just want to throw in a few points. If you're a competitive triathlete, it's not about health. That's about as healthy as I was when I was a 300-pound bodybuilder. Let's be honest. You can take things to mitigate risk, but there's no way to say
Good
that
point,
you
man.
do that
Good point.
you can do anything to help anti-aging at the same time.
Jim just officially shit in my mouth, but good job.
It doesn't work. Also, the use of metformin when you're a competitive triathlete, I don't see that it works. I don't see that it works when you're competing because
it's not.
of a couple reasons, but maybe in an off season where you reset your insulin sensitivity could work. But again, that's an area that I'm not very familiar with in terms of use of drugs and dosing. But just to be clear, you're a competitive triathlete or a competitive endurance athlete. It's
not looking about your health. You're right, dude.
Or anti-aging. It's just it's not. You're not on the same path, man.
So it's totally true, Josh. So again, it goes back to what you and I were talking about before the show. And again, I'm not here to judge people. I don't give a shit what you do, what floats your boat, what makes you happy. But as Josh said very, very eloquently, is it about happiness or fulfillment or both? And the reality is again, and I'm just a big picture guy the way I live my life. I'm in the now. I'm the whole Eckhart Tolle. I live in the now. I'm not living in the past or the future. It doesn't exist. But the reality is, if you care about your family, your wife, your kids, whatever, people that are coming behind you, and you want to maximize your life expectancy on Earth, why are you doing something that's going to shorten your lifespan? I mean, again, re-examine things for yourself. Are you that compelled to run and to destroy your body physically? Because we all know that these people destroy their bodies. Is it that important for you to be 55 years old and have type 2 diabetes and 1 foot in the grave because you run 40 triathlons and you've won 1 or 2? I mean, again, maybe it is, and I'm not, no judgment, but I'm here to live and maximize this energy body, these chakras, as long as I can, so that I can give back to as many people as I can in service to others. That's how I live my life. I'm not, again, obviously you guys know I'm serious about my fitness. Jim's serious about his fitness. Josh is serious about his fitness. Too many people get caught up into these fads, whatever they are, and then they live in that mindset of I got to do this. Think about how stupid, I don't want to judge people by saying how stupid it is, but what is driving you to run 45 miles a day?
Yeah, it's insane. I have a buddy of mine that did an ultra, dude. It was 148 miles, 2 days in the mountains. He's like, you're hallucinating. People are passing out in the ditches. He's like, the bushes look like damn bears.
You're hallucinating.
I don't get it. But then also people look at me that I'm like a freak when I like to work 18 hours.
Yeah, you work so much.
Everybody's got their own poison, right? So and like Jay always says, dude, there's no judgment. I mean, to me, I guess being an endurance athlete's a hell of a lot better than shoving McDonald's down your throat and sitting down and watching 4.7 hours of TV like the average American does. So, okay, so next question, and this is actually something that I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm really, I'm always interested in, but I know my last couple times of having my blood work done with metformin, my blood glucose level, and even my wife's right now, have been very low. We're almost in this hypoglycemic state, right? So the next question is really about that. So say you're constantly working out in a depleted glycogen state, such as approaching for shows or whatever, or if you're on metformin like I am right now and am in that state, would constant training in that state change the expression of fibers and switch more from a type 1 to type 2? I don't know if you can switch muscle fibers, but I mean, is there any risk to that?
I think it's more the stimulation that you provide the muscles. Again, we try to answer this in the group, man. It's a complicated question, but if you're trying to hit different muscle fibers, that would be typically a different exercise regime, a different rep range, a different speed of contraction, not so much the glucose level at the time, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of research, and I've read it when I was a dork and I was on PubMed in my late 20s and stuff like that, about deconversion of muscle fiber typing. It's proven, there's Weiss and Fleiss, or what's the name? The two guys, Kramer and Weiss, or Fleiss. Kramer and Fleiss have done studies where they have converted muscle fibers from type 2 to type 3 and type 1 to type 1 or 2B. So there's been conversion from training methodologies. It takes a lot of time. So it is possible. But to answer his question in that realm, no, you're born. All of us are, again, it's the same thing with somatotypes, right? We're born ectomorphic, endomorphic, or mesomorphic. So when you're born those body types, and again, most of us are a combination of all three, but when you're born those body types, you have a certain amount of androgen receptors and muscle fiber typing specific, right? If you're a quick twitch, explosive muscle fiber type guy like a LeBron James, a Michael Jordan, you're gonna know, your aesthetics are, you have veins and you have like really looking hard, explosive, muscularly dense body parts. That's just the way you look when you're in like a tank top or with your shirt off or whatever, versus a guy who has a lot of type 1 fibers, which are endurance, long, the quote unquote slow, amorphous looking type people. So everybody's fiber typing is pretty much set biologically. Now, obviously it adapts based on your training. So if you're kind of in the middle, or you have a lot of people, or you have a combination of all those fibers, your type of training then determines the way your expression is, your gene expression, and your androgen receptor saturation, depending on drugs, testosterone, anabolics, whatever. So all of those things kind of intermingle to make you look a specific way. But to answer his question, no, I mean, that's not going to happen. Metformin is so minimal or minuscule in the overall big picture of whether you're going to have fiber type or conversion. So it's not going to, it doesn't matter.
Love it, man. So quite a few questions here still left. So do you have any suggestions, and this is something that I think a lot of dudes struggle with. Do you have any suggestions for inspiring your wife or significant other to have the same motivation of working out and eating healthy? My wife's in decent shape, but she does not share the same passion as me.
You want to take that, Jim?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's a tough one, man.
It is a tough one.
I'll just speak to a couple of scenarios that I see. So, we have a client come to us and say, hey, I want to get in shape. That client starts seeing results, losing weight, and then their partner, significant other, isn't doing that and becomes even more kind of self-aware of their own overweight or out of shapeness or whatever the appearance is. And when that happens, when one person commits and starts improving or changing their body type, the other person hasn't and doesn't want to for whatever reason, that sometimes causes issues. Yeah. And so as the said person, the training person, gets more and more in shape, the not training person, the resistant person, gets more and more self-conscious. And so this divide kind of starts. And that's tough, man. That's a tough one. My advice is not to get there in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point.
Early in my life, I had women just bounce out of my life because they, we didn't share the same things. And for me, lifting and being eaten a certain way and stuff, was always a very important part of my life. I would imagine if I put myself in somebody else's shoes, like one of our clients, and I woke up and I'm 30% body fat, and my wife's 40% body fat, and I decide I'm going to get in shape, because I can't go to her and make whatever has to click inside click. But if I wake up one day and that switch clicks and I start to do this process and change my body, it's hard to convince the other person, man, because believe me, dude, we've tried it. We've had, I don't know how many people have come to me over my span of helping people and said, oh man, I need to get motivated. And it doesn't matter what I say or do. Something either clicks inside or it doesn't. And it's very difficult to provide that stimulus to that person to make them whatever has to click. And so, that's something that hopefully, your significant other enough to maybe help that process and get them interested in supporting you, at least, if you're the person that wants to change and lose weight and change your lifestyle. One of the things that we always recommend too, that we've talked to these clients about, is, how in shape are your kids?
Right.
And, it's a touchy subject, man, because usually said kids of said people are overweight. And then, I go as gently as I can into, well, what are your kids' eating habits? They're your eating habits, man. You taught them what to eat, man. And so if you sit around all day eating crap, of course your kids eat crap.
Right.
It's a learned behavior, And so do you want to set the example for your kids to be healthy? Because those examples that you set when the kids are young like that, those are things that stay with them their whole life. Those are impressions and habits that stay with them their whole life. No matter what, even what happens if they get derailed, they can go back to default and remember what happened, remember those learned behaviors and eating good food. And so there's a couple different ways to approach it, man. It's a tough one though.
Yeah, man. I couldn't agree more. Like you see an obese couple walking into a restaurant. What's behind them is their obese kids. And dude, I'm kind of an asshole when it comes to subject, but I'm like, dude, that should be considered child abuse.
Child abuse,
right? I mean, now, dude, we're seeing fifth graders with atherosclerosis, type 2 diabetes.
Child abuse.
And I heard the other day, now I could be way off on the stat, but I heard something like if a kid before the age of 12 develops type 2 diabetes, there's no chance they're making it to 7 years old.
They're done.
Right? So it's just so insane, dude.
So I could go all day on this. So I'm going to be really short, and maybe 90 seconds. I'm going to try to rock this. So I've been married 3 times. Okay. My first wife, her and I bought a bunch of real estate together, made a lot of money. We weren't made for each other. We parted ways. She got a massive check and went her merry way. And, I had some that I then married my next wife. And, and that went south, and everything that happened to me in my life, which has now made me into the man that I am today. So I'm grateful for it. Everything that comes in our process is a learning opportunity. But, both of those women, the first one, she went to the gym, but had wanted no part of training with me, which is fine. I mean, I wasn't fine, but that's what she wanted. And then the second one went to the gym with me because she felt like she had to, but she had no interest in it. So I finally, with Monica, I have a woman who's just as committed to me, to training as I am, who lives for training, who, enjoys it, is passionate about it. We both have that motto that I talk about all the time, constant and never ending improvement. We both strive for that. So, I think it goes back to what Jim says. If I'm going to have the final say on this, it's going to be, before you get married, analyze the situation, right? Are you a guy or a gal that loves to train and loves to go to the gym, and exercise is literally a pivotal component of your life? Well, then your partner, your significant other, your spouse has to have the same commitment, because if they don't, it's going to be problems. And as Jim and I can say, and we deal with this every time, or all the time, excuse me, what ends up happening when you have one spouse who's fully committed to fitness and the other isn't, it becomes a nightmare horror story where the spouse who feels shameful now because they don't have the body that the other spouse have will start torturing the other spouse and making them feel guilty and hating on them and just sending them through God knows what kind of guilt aversion. And it just becomes a process that spirals. And then if you have kids and you throw them into the mix, it's a really toxic soup bowl. And you just don't want to have that in your life. So I think the easiest way to do it, and this doesn't answer the guy's question, is you got to choose somebody who has the same commitment that you have. And, if you are a guy who's 60 and you've had, or 55 or whatever, and you've been with your your wife for a long time and she still has no commitment, then, you just have to have an arrangement.
Yeah.
Hey, honey, this is what drives me and fuels me, and this is my passion. Please allow me to be this, and don't judge me because you don't want this. I mean, I don't really know beyond that,
Yeah, I know. I love it, man, and I love what Jim said too, as far as it gets to a point where it's not just about us. Like, it drives me nuts when I see people that get married and they let themselves go. Like, part of the reason that I take care of myself is, I owe it to my wife. Like, she signed up for something. She didn't sign up for me to be a fat slob. And all the three of us are blessed, right? We have amazing, beautiful wives that are in way better shape than us. So, but I see this all the time personally in the entrepreneur front, right? But at the same point, like, my wife isn't driven in business like I am,
right.
But we communicate all the time. She supports me. She doesn't need to be a driver like me, right? But we still communicate and support. So, you can only control yourself, right? So don't be so focused on them.
Communication is everything.
Yeah, just communicate, and as long as they're supporting you with it, they got to choose their own path too. So, sounds to me, and I don't know the gentleman asked this question, but don't try to control your wife, man. Just try to focus on you, what you're doing, support her at her goals, ask her to support you with your goals, communicate, and maybe she doesn't want to be a health nut. Maybe that's not her path, and that's okay. Right. She'll support you doing yours. You support her with hers, and I see it go both ways. I see the destructive, but I've also known so many people where one is in great shape and the other isn't, but they communicate and they still support each other, and it can be successful too.
That's very well said.
So next question. You've said for dropping fat, only carbs before and right after your workout. But for maximum fat loss, if I'm getting up at 5:30 a.m. to hit the gym, will I lose more fat and keep my muscle if I go to the gym fasted? I lift first thing in the morning, or no, I lift first, then I do cardio. I take a pre-workout drink, no calories, or should I have some carbs, protein shake before I go? Since my glycogen's depleted, I've been lifting for 30 years, if that matters, since you've talked about this. I've been doing a second cardio workout at lunch. Should I do that as fasted as possible for a midday 2 p.m. workout?
So there's a lot of questions in there, Jim. So let me just summarize.
We got some lengthy ones this time, man.
Yeah, no, it's all good stuff. I'll summarize it and Jim can answer it. So this guy is trained. So this is the guy, this is like the same dilemma that you have, Josh. If you're trying to practice intermittent fasting, but you're one of those people that trains first thing in the morning, then you kind of have to reconfigure your non-eating or your non-feeding window. So he's asking, is it better if I'm trying for ultimate fat loss to still carb before my training in the morning and carb right after, and then fast throughout the rest of the day? If I heard that correctly, and I'll let Jim answer it, but I wanted to frame it so that people could understand. So Jim, go ahead and answer that.
I think it comes down to what's important to you, man. And look, I don't know everything. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that. I only know how to skin a cat a few ways. And if you want to retain or gain muscle, you are not going to train fasted.
Right.
At least resistance training.
Absolutely agree.
You can do cardio fasted.
Agree.
If it's not too of a high intensity, but you can't. I mean, I'm sure you could you throw drugs out. I'm sure there's different ways that you could do that. But if you want to retain or gain muscle, do not train fasted.
Right.
But what does that mean, though, Jim? I mean, does it mean like, hey, man, I got to get up and eat this big meal 90 minutes before I go work out? Or is it like, hey, 30 minutes before I can put down a little bit of Greek yogurt, just like enough to get in me?
Well, you probably want to get 30 grams, Jim always says 20, depending on your size, 20 to 30 grams of simple carbs.
So sugars of some sort.
Oatmeal. It doesn't even have to be sugar. It could just be oatmeal, something that gets in your bloodstream.
Yeah, and oatmeal isn't really a simple carb unless it's ground up. But we always recommend whey protein and oatmeal. I mean, that's my default pre-workout. That's my default post-workout. You can throw some fat in there too, depending on your program. But it's easy to get up in the morning. I throw a quarter, a half, depending on the day, of raw oats into my shaker cup. I put 60 grams of protein. I shake it up and drink it. It takes about 3.5 minutes, if that.
Right.
And very easy to do. It doesn't fill up my stomach. I could, climb stairs for an hour afterwards without puking. Very easy to do. Much better than a Greek yogurt. But I would be a little bit selective. I want protein and some carbohydrates together.
How soon before, though? Because, I mean, does it need time to digest? I mean, is it 30 minutes, 60 minutes? Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter,
30 minutes would be fine. I do it between 30 and 60 before.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, I agree with Jim 100%. By the way, and Jim and I rarely agree on this kind of stuff, but I have learned hard lessons about training fasted. Okay, when I first started doing intermittent fasting way back in the day, and I was working off Martin Burkhan's, stuff and research, and Martin's a good guy, leangains.com. The reality is that he's wrong about training, about doing lifting fasted. Okay. It's just wrong. I know he has a lot of research that says, you can do it. But again, there's just too many fiber adaptations that happen when you're training and you're using the aerobic glycolytic and the phosphatic acid, or not acid, but whatever, the two energy pathways that require explosive movements. And if you don't have any carbs and you just fasted all night and you're trying to train on them, you're not going to get maximum recruitment. It's just, you're not going to have maximum power. It's just not there.
Well, it's the same as the dude that does cardio first and resistance trains after, which is just a big no-no, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing it first thing in the morning and you're at, a 6 to 8 hour window of fasted, yes, absolutely. I mean, you should never, first off, everybody, and this is a Jay Campbell rule again. There's nobody that should be doing cardio, regardless of the intensity and the type, whether it's, high impact or low impact, and then doing weight training while you're fasted. That's absurd. I mean, anybody who's doing that, stop. And again, there's a lot of people out there. You're right. They do that. They're programmed. Their mindset's like, I only have an hour, so I'm gonna do my cardio and then I'm gonna hit the weights. It's fucking ridiculous. Yeah. So stupid. You cannot do that. Yeah. So, but the bottom line is Jim's. I do that carbohydrate protein. I mean, the scoop of, not even a whole scoop sometimes, but like maybe 3 or 4 tablespoons of oats. It's probably 20, 25 grams of carbs in my shake. And I drink it on my way to the gym.
Yeah, you could even cut down the time if you wanted. If you used a simple sugar and a whey protein,
Glycofuse,
you could drink that as you're working out.
Yes,
it doesn't matter. That's fine too.
All right, so I know you got a hard stop here soon, Jay. So
no, I got a couple minutes.
Okay, cool. So so the second part of his question then is and I always have this question too because I have to train early morning. But if I was going to do a afternoon cardio session, could you train, take your carbs pre and post workout, and then after that, then fast for a certain window throughout the day and do a cardio session in the evening and have the same effect?
No, but what you can do, and I'll let Jim finish. But what you can do is, post-workout, you do 15 minutes of cardio. Remember we talked about that 2 weeks ago? You go right into something that gets your heart rate up to 160, 155 to 170, and you do 15 minutes. Because remember, if you train effectively, and again, that's a whole other study for another day. We don't know how many people actually train efficiently? Probably not many. Okay. But if you train effectively, you go to, you're using Ford's training as an example, Jim's training style, and you get your heart rate into the 135, 140. I mean, you shouldn't be over 140 when you're weight training. If you are, maybe because you're a squat or a high rep set, you might go up a little bit, but you should be in the 125 to 135 range when you're really effectively training. You then go right through a beeline into cardio, post-workout, whatever it is, for 12 to 15 minutes and get your heart rate up to 165, 170. That's a metabolic blowtorch. Then you can have some sort of post-workout carbs. But again, it's like Jim says, is your goal fat loss or muscle gain? If your goal is fat loss, then carbs right after, but then, lower food intake or caloric intake the rest of the day. I mean, again, it just depends on what is your goal. If your goal is ultimately fat loss, then all carbs should be pre, during, and post, and no more carbs the rest of the day. And that's even if you're a mesomorph, even if you're elite. There's no carbs, and again, you don't have to fast the rest of the day, but anything that you eat after that should be very low glycemic, probably, like Jim says, meat and vegetables make your dreams come true. That's what you're eating. You're not eating anything else that's going to spike your insulin.
Yeah, I think the only way to structure a fast around that would be you hit your carbs around your workout. You first thing when you wake up, you do your resistance training, you hit your first cardio session afterwards, you do your post-workout nutrition, and then you eat the rest of your calories within a few hours of that.
Right.
And then you wake up at 5, you're done lifting, 6, 7, whatever. You eat all your meals by 10 or 11 in the morning, and then you start to fast to the next day. That would be the only way to kind of structure that. But again, that's not very conducive with gaining or maintaining muscle. Maybe a maintenance, but definitely not gaining. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, love it. One thing I'm really excited about, you guys, was watching and listening to this is, we talk a lot about the blowtorch diet, Jay and Jim's diets that they have, and Ford's training, and for their one-on-one clients to go out there and really master this stuff. With one-on-one, it would cost you about 10, maybe 15 grand with one-on-one coaching time to really get this stuff down. Well, Jim and Jay pretty soon here in a few weeks are coming out to Phoenix. We're doing some videos, some shoots of some, we're creating just an epic affordable product for you guys. We haven't fully set the price, but we're trying to keep it under $500, where you're able to learn all of this through videos, through a sequence of a product, so you don't have to go out there because we know a lot of you can't maybe afford to pay Jim 15 grand to really dial this stuff in with this. So really excited for that. So that's going to probably be coming next couple months, right? We should have that finalized. So super excited for that. So all right, dude. So the next question is, and I'll kind of turn this into two questions, because so his question is, does it make sense to time workouts around your injection spots? Like, hey, if I shoot my TRT in my triceps, should I do triceps? Then the other question, he didn't ask this, but I want to follow it up. Is there anything to spot injecting? Like, if I want bigger traps, should I be shooting that shit in my traps?
From a legal purposes standpoint, because this is all about health and longevity, it's hard for us to really answer that question, but we can definitely take our health and longevity doctor coats off, and Jim can talk about, the professional bodybuilding and the performance enhancement and theoretical stuff. So go ahead.
But just roll back on that, dude. If I'm doing the TRT dose that my doctor prescribes me,
right.
I'm breaking up into 3 doses a week.
Yep.
I can spot inject that by still. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
No.
But is there anything that is there any truth to it?
So
I'll sum that up.
Yeah, hold on, Jim. So hold on one second, Jim. So the answer to that. So this is a great question. So the answer to that is there really isn't, but in quote unquote mainstream medicine right now, they're going to tell you can't inject in areas other than the places that we say you can, which is, right here, your upper glute pad, your quads, and your, the lower fat part, of your stomach, like the sub-Q stuff. Like that's where they're going to say in mainstream medicine today, those are the places to inject. But I'll let Jim finish this. Of course, Josh, bodybuilders are injecting into lagging body parts, into areas they think that there may be localized hypertrophy growth, whatever. So, Jim, go ahead. Answer that.
The long answer is no.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
There are things that will create inflammation in that area.
Right.
And appear that you've had growth. You can get scar tissue that would appear to be growth. Or you can inject silicone if you really nuts.
Rich piano.
Allegedly. And have localized growth. But the answer is no. Just trust me.
Right.
In there.
The answer is no, but the truth is that guys do get, localized fiber splitting from, as Jim said, from scar tissue, right? Yeah. So if you're injecting, again, I'm not talking about
scar tissue. It's not. There's no hypertrophy.
It's not hypertrophy. It's literally an increase in cross-sectional scar tissue, which does expand the arm, from an external appearance. But Jim's right. It's very, very minimal. I've seen so much studies about localized hypertrophy of guys trying to get fiber cross-sectional expansion. There's been a lot of studies in like the 90s and the early 2000s about this, Josh, and there's no conclusive proof. There are guys that swear that if you inject massive amounts into certain areas, that over time you might have a tiny, tiny bit more growth. But it's like Jim said, there's no conclusive proof, and there's definitely no data.
All I can tell you is been down that road. Known many guys that chase that, and no. Plus, you could also say there is something to maybe volumizing that muscle if you're shooting like 3 to 5 cc's into a small muscle belly, and you're having a facial stretching type of effect. That has some theory, but we're talking about TRT doses where you're doing maybe what.
Right.
To a half of a.
Right. It's too small of a dose, dude.
So you won't have any of that type of effect where you could possibly stretch the facial tissue. And so there's no.
Josh, I know you've seen that guy. What's his name?
I was just thinking about that. I don't know. I can't remember his freaking name.
Right. Where he's like
Dr. TRT, but he's injecting in his upper chest.
Right here. Honestly, Jim can share with us. We might as well go deep. We're all about transparency here. Jim's injected pretty much everywhere. And there's a lot of, and I've never injected here. I would be honest and tell you if I did, but there's a lot of nerve endings and nerve fibers up here in this area. And I do not recommend it at all. I do not recommend it. Do you agree?
Yeah. I had this friend one time that was, allegedly injecting up to 15 cc's in a week, and trust me, you get real creative, into different spots, and
So there's no proven benefit of spot injections, also of training the body part that you inject in that day. But there is a benefit to rotating injection sites to minimize scar tissue, right? So kind of maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that's why we, you see us recommend, and a lot of doctors now are going to using insulin needles to minimize scar tissue instead of like a 25 or on up gauge needle. and if let's just say you hit the same spot every day, week in, week out for your injections, yeah, you're going to accumulate more scar tissue at that point. So everybody who's in the community and hopefully your doctor is telling you to rotate sides. You can also do some massage in that area. I do a very aggressive kind of therapy at home that we've talked about at length before with Beastie Balls, and you can do with foam rollers and even solid stainless steel rollers to kind of dissipate that scar tissue if you have any formation.
Yeah, and that's all in the book too. I'll just always default to that. There's a whole chapter about, reducing scar tissue and using the Beastie Ball and using, foam rolling and different things. I mean, the truth is that scar tissue was a bigger deal when guys didn't have access to these small gauge insulin type needles. We didn't have the formulas that they have now where like the dosages are really compressed and they're really particulated. The particulates are very thin and able to go through smaller gauge needles. I mean, as Jim could tell you back in the day, some of the oils just didn't move through anything unless it was a larger barrel needle. So scar tissue really isn't that big of an issue anymore, especially when you're using like a 29, 30, 31 gauge needle. You can do it for life. I mean, obviously you want to rotate your injection spots. And again, I'll default to the book. All of this for anybody who's a newbie watching this right now and is like freaking out about being injected. I mean, these are so painless.
And when we're talking about TRT level dosages, and so literally it's a cc or less a week in your body, and hopefully you're breaking that injection up over the week. There's just it's not going to happen. I mean, scarring is going to be very, very minimal, especially if you rotate sites.
Yeah. Something we always talk about. I mean, it's been about a year, but I mean, I go, like shoulder, tricep, then my quads, and right. Never had an issue, right? Because then it's like this side, then my right side, and it's like shit. It's like 6 weeks before I get back to the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the last question that we have for today is, once you got your TRT optimized, like once you've dialed in, I know this is more of a question for their doctor, but once you've got your testosterone, estrogen, like all your levels are great, hematocrit, all that's looking good, how often then should you be checking your blood work?
It's a great question. I'll start it off, Jim, and you finish. So again, I'll default to the book, and obviously there's a cheat sheet back in chapter 10 about, decades of your life. It answers this exact question. So, but it's actually, it doesn't answer this question. It more answers it like how often should you get your blood when you're not dialed in, just as a general prerequisite. But so this is a great question. When you're dialed in on TRT, meaning you have your testosterone and your estrogen balanced, you're at a level that makes you feel good. Remember, the two goals of testosterone therapy are happiness and balance, right? So everything is dialed. When you're that level, it still goes back to decade of life. So I'll start like in the 30s. And of course, we know that there are guys in their 20s that need this now. So, but if you're, let's just do it all. If you're in your 20s and you're doing testosterone replacement therapy, you got a really progressive doctor and you're lucky and you're 27 or 28, you definitely need at least once a year, at least once. In your 30s, twice a year, okay, to measure what's going on, to see what's going on. In your 40s, still twice a year, but once you get to beyond 46, 47, so Jim and I are getting close to that age, then it comes down to symptoms, right? Are you starting to have like a reduced urine volume stream? Are you feeling like a need to go to the bathroom, urinate a couple of times a night in the middle of the night? That could be symptoms of a constricted prostate or an enlarged EP, start suffering from benign prostatic hyperplasia. That's when you're going to go and get your PSA. So it just really comes down to, what are your symptoms? I'd say in your 60s, 55 and up, at least 3 times a year. And that also comes around, and again, this is in the book, but that also comes down to having a digital rectal exam, probably a colonoscopy, some form of a diagnostic, just to be safe. But there's no reason. And another thing too, and I'll add, and I don't want to steal all Jim's thunder, but Jim talks about having a baseline forever, right? Get your blood work in your early 20s and then keep it consistent, hold on to the files. I mean, you obviously don't need to have files anymore because you can store them on your computer, but you want to have a running record of your data. You want to know what changed in your 20s versus your 30s versus your 40s and your 50s. So if something looks aberrant, if one range has all of a sudden gone off the chart, and the reality is you want to be able to have another test, right? I mean, the simple fact is you got to get another test to understand it.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, we just talked about this on another deal, but if you're in your 40s, I think twice a year is probably adequate.
Right.
We're always working on something. I'm always fiddling with this, or trying to change this, or trying to bring this up, or seeing how this different food or fat affects my diet. So I do it a little bit more often. On average, I'm a 4 times a year guy. There's also been periods where I've been experimenting with stuff where I've done twice a month. So it really depends what's going on, but everything tuned in, 35 and above, I think, twice a year at the maximum would be safe. Once a year minimally.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, it comes down to symptoms when you get older. And if you have something that doesn't seem right, then, you're probably going to have to get your blood work done again. And again, that's why we work with Checked. That's why we recommend discountedlabs.com, privatemdlabs.com. You don't need to go to your general practitioner whenever something goes wrong symptomatically to get your blood work done. Because we know if you do, you're going to be playing a game, especially if you're quote unquote healthy. So you always want to have access to these private lab facilities. And again, obviously we highly recommend Checked, but if you're not going to use Checked, don't go to a general practitioner. Go to one of these discounted lab places and get your labs pulled on your own. And obviously own the book, have access to the book. The book gives you a cheat sheet. It's a picture, a pictographic guide for the most part in a lot of ways of what to do. Yeah. So obviously having the book and having this knowledge, listening to this podcast, surfing trtrevolution.com. All this information is out there. It's readily available. It's free. It's accessible. Don't sit around and take chances with your health. Again, there's nothing more important than understanding your internal biochemistry.
Yeah, and Jay, dude, you're so right on not going to your general doctor, right? In most cases, right? Like, so one of my really good friends right now, a really good family friend of mine, he just went to his doctor, found he had low T. So right now they have him doing 1 injection a week. Right? There's a pill to manage estrogen, 1 injection a week. And he went and asked, because I'm like, dude, you got to do multiple injections, and explain the theory behind it. His doctor's like, no, you don't want that. You actually want the ups and downs. That's what his doctor he just called me this morning and was like, is this right? And I'm like, look, dude, I'm not the expert. I can get you with my boys Jim and Jay, but I'm pretty sure your fucking doctor's very, very wrong. Right? But that's the crap that's getting told.
Yeah. Sad, man.
It's just insane. So the other thing that I want to say, you guys that they watch and listen to this, make sure, this show, the Ask Jim and Jay show, is just a scratch of the surface of the content that exists out there that Jim and Jay are putting out there. So if you go to trtrevolution.com, www.trtrevolution.com, Jim and Jay are literally putting out daily content. They're having a lot of different industry experts in the space. Again, go check that out, because holy crap, your mind will be blown with the content they have there. Also, you can download Jay's book 100% for free, the TRT replacement, or the definitive TRT replacement manual, and you can also link up with Checked right there to get your hormones optimized. So anyway, you guys, I guess that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you guys for watching and listening, and we will check you next time.